Russian authorities have reported a massive Ukrainian drone attack on the Engels Airbase in Saratov Oblast, with Russia's defense ministry claiming to have downed 54 drones over the area. Windows were also blown out at a nearby hospital where one woman was injured, as well as two kindergartens and a school. The Ukrainian military general staff claimed responsibility for the attack in a social media post, saying the operation was a collaboration with the Security Service of Ukraine and the country's Special Operations Forces. Engels, situated more than 465 miles from the Ukrainian border, is a major strategic bomber base from which Russian aircrafts have launched long-range missile strikes through the three-year-old war. It has been attacked several times by Ukraine, most recently in January. Well, joining us now is Gilbert Doktorov, international relations and Russian affairs expert. Thank you very much for being with us on Newsx. How do you view this latest offensive in the Russian-Ukraine conflict?
The war isn't over until it's over. The agreements that have been reached between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky, are for only a partial ceasefire, which at this given moment is said to exclude attacks on oil and gas facilities, that is, on energy generation in Ukraine. These attacks were immediately halted by President Putin after his phone call with Donald Trump. The Ukrainians have been slower to react, but I assume they also are implementing this limitation on attacks. What we saw yesterday and what you have just reported is, of course, not covered by any agreements at present on a ceasefire. Therefore, it is fair game for Ukraine to have a drone attack on the Engels Airbase. Let me also mention, though, that this has been reported in Western media. It is not generally announced in Russian news. The news tickers this morning say nothing about it. And it's understandable the Russians are keen not to inflame public opinion by announcing what attacks the Ukrainians are making. This is the fog of war.
As far as the US and Ukraine are concerned, that minerals deal is on the anvil. Do you believe it could be signed soon?
I think it will be signed, but I pay greater attention to the discussion of the United States taking over the nuclear power stations in Ukraine, because those are tangible, identifiable assets, which are very important for the Ukrainian economy, given that non-nuclear, meaning gas and oil fired electric generating plants, have been largely destroyed in the last 2 years of bombing by the Russians. So the nuclear power plants, which are largely still viable, although the single largest one in Zaporozhye will take some repairs, nonetheless, these are important sources of electricity to Ukraine during the several years that it will take to rebuild their non-nuclear generating capacity. As for the rare earths, that is highly speculative. No one knows for sure the value of it or the commercial exploitation value of such deposits as may exist. So the mineral rights agreement will be signed as a matter of principle to show that the United States has a long-term commitment to the security of Ukraine by its participation in important economic activities, business activities on the ground in Ukraine.
Right. Also, I have to ask you about, Gilbert, the mediation process, and the US, of course, taking that over as well. How do you view the impact the phone calls, both with Putin and Zelensky, are going to have on the mediation efforts for the conflict going ahead? What do you make of these first conversations that have happened, of course, most significantly with Putin, but then also the follow-up with Zelensky, and where you see the mediation process then going?
The mediation process is well underway. There is a lot of detail work to be done. Let us note that in the meetings that will take place in Saudi Arabia on Monday, the Russian Foreign Ministry is not taking part. Who is taking part? Technical people, security people. The United States is sending CIA. The Russians are sending FSB, their equivalent, because the issues here are technical, detailed, and require substantive work on the ground. And that is what's about to happen. So this is not blah, blah. This is very important, detailed work to make a ceasefire and a long-term peace agreement viable and implementable. Therefore, it is on track, but not in a very short period of time. It will take weeks, if not months, for the full details of a secure ceasefire and peace agreement to be put in place, including provisions for monitors. The work that has been discussed so far by the Western Europeans was in terms of peacekeepers. That is off limits. The Russians don't accept it, and it only serves to continue the war indefinitely. What is in the cards is provision for monitors. In the past, going back to Minsk II, the monitors were provided by the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, although they performed their job badly because they were all Europeans and they were afraid to open their mouths and say what they actually saw, lest it be interpreted by their bosses back in Western Europe as being pro-Russian remarks. What will happen now will be non-European monitors invited, and I imagine that India will be a major participant in any such monitoring effort, which makes the peace workable.
Yes, so what do you make of India's role now going forward in the peace efforts as well? Our role has, of course, been acknowledged by both sides as being significant.
Yes, it's definitely the case. And not just in the immediate question of Ukraine, which is, of course, foremost in everybody's thinking, but in the broader issue of global security as the world evolves to multipolarity, having left behind American global hegemony. India will be a big player. There's no question about it. And Mr. Modi is positioning himself precisely for that by attending the festivities on May 9th in Moscow to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, or the war in Europe. That is significant. It will be an opportunity to meet the three of the world's biggest and most important powers, Russia, China, and India. And I would bet that Mr. Trump will be there as well. So India's role is central today and will be even more important in the new and evolving power structure, the governing board of the world, which supersedes the World War II arrangements of the UN, in which India did not have a seat.
All right, let me leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on that big story.